I've designed a simple, easy to make disc sanding storage that not only keeps your sandpaper dust free, but they're also extremely easy to get out and put on your sander. I've also made a fully 3D printed chisel cabinet and a storage for your sandpaper on a roll. And if you've been debating with yourself if to get a 3D printer, I'll explain why I think it's the perfect complement to woodworking. Limited workshop storage can be a huge pain. Since I recently moved into this space, I've just jammed a lot of stuff into the cabinet space I have. Mainly this big IKEA cabinet. So I wanted to clean that up, and that left me with wall space. But then I had the issue with dust. So in order to get around that, I've come up with a couple of solutions. And I 3D printed all of those solutions, and I've created files to download for each and every item. And I ended up with quite a few 3D printed parts, but to be honest, a lot of them are just prototypes and things that ended up being mistakes. The first thing I did was to attack these sandpaper rolls. I might have over-engineered this one, but I'll get to why later. I started out by measuring the sandpaper roll and thought about what I wanted for this one. I wanted it to be dust-free, but I also wanted it to be easy to dispense the paper from the holder. So what I came up with was this cylinder that houses the roll. There's a slot at the back where the paper comes out. At the front, I attached two 5mm threaded inserts for a 3mm machine screw. I use a soldering iron to press the threaded inserts into the pre-made hole, and this might require some practice if you've never done it before. And I'm certainly no pro, but it works. By the way, if you download the plans, there will be a bill of material for everything you need to make these, as well as for the other stuff in the video. I had an old metal hacksaw blade that I drilled 2 holes in to match the holes for the threaded inserts. There are lots of holes in this video, just live with it. Then I could attach the entire thing to the wall with some screws, add the paper and wire it through the gap. Attach the 2 screw-on lids I made, and then lastly the hacksaw blade. I have 2 small washers between the blade and the 3D printed part not to pinch the paper. Now I can just pull the paper and rip it at the hacksaw blade. And a trick to prevent these from constantly breaking on you is to attach some duct tape to the back of it, and it gets a lot stronger and will last longer. I mean, yeah, a bit over-engineered, but it actually works. It doesn't eat up a lot of space and the paper is basically dust-free. Mission achieved. The only downside I see is that there's not a lot to grab onto when you want to pull the paper. But not a big issue. It works. He's talking about 3D printers again. I don't have one, so how am I supposed to print? If you don't have a 3D printer, you can use the sponsor of today's video, PCBWay. They can 3D print any design you upload to their website and have it shipped directly to you. Apparently there's a service you can use to 3D print. So go check out PCBWay.com for more information. Link in the description will give you a $5 welcome bonus. That's it, I'm ordering. Another thing I wanted to attach to the wall were my chisels. Although they came neatly stored in a wooden box, I keep moving that box around because I have nowhere to place it. And it can't be mounted to the wall because all the chisels would fall out on my feet. That would hurt. So I modeled up a fully 3D printable cabinet to store my chisels on the wall. And this thing is basically all 3D printed and adapted to my chisels, but it can also be used with any chisels. You just have to make the rack for the chisels yourself. And you could also make it out of wood, because I made that part switchable. I made a ton of different prototypes for my particular chisels, and that's one of the reasons why 3D printing is awesome for woodworking, and especially for tool storage, prototyping. You can fine-tune and reprint and go for as much perfection as you want. I printed one of these in an hour, then I tried the fit, readjusted my design a bit and printed another one, until I had one that was a good fit. This turned out to be a big print, so I made the pieces separate so that you can print it with a printer that has a surface of 256mm, which is the case for my P1P printer. But if you have an even bigger printer, you can print it in one go. Good for you. So this cabinet consists of a couple of parts. The main body of the cabinet, which is printed in 2 parts, that goes together with glue, and to give it some extra strength and keep it in shape, I made some of these dog bones that go on the outside. They are optional, but I thought it would be good whilst designing it. Now I'm not so sure if they do anything. Either way. The main cabinet also has some holes for threaded inserts, so I attached them the same way I attached the previous ones. And these are for the hinges. The hinges are also 3D printed in 2 parts and they come together with a 3mm rod. In my case, a brass rod. I just push the 2 pieces together and press the brass rod into the hole and have it cut to size with a hacksaw blade. This is the only thing that I printed in carbon fiber reinforced PLA. Everything else is just PLA. The door to the cabinet also consists of 2 parts, but to make this a dust somewhat safe cabinet, I had a piece of 3mm acrylic cut and glued in place on the door. There's a groove for that on the inside of the door. I super glued that in place, which isn't ideal, but I didn't have a clear drying glue at home, so I ordered that and will have to make a new door later. Which is another nice thing with 3D printers. It's easy to repeat something. The door also has holes for the 3mm threaded inserts, so I attached them as well. On the door and on the cabinet there are holes for magnets, and I attach them with super glue and make sure they have the correct polarity facing each other. Otherwise they kind of counteract their purpose. The hinges are screwed in place on the door and then on the cabinet. The handle also has slots for threaded inserts and can then be screwed in place from the back of the door. Lastly, I attached the chisel holder. It just slides down in place with a tight fit. Then I could attach the cabinet to the wall with the pre-made holes and some screws, and then there it is. I mean, it looks kind of nice. And to think it's all 3D printed. If you want to make this yourself, there are links down below to print this yourself. And if you have a bigger 3D printer than me, there are files to print this in one go as well. And there is of course a list what you would need to make this as well. Now, if you don't have the exact same chisels as I do, you can just swap out the rack and make your own out of wood or out of plastic if you want. And there's basically room for 6 chisels. Now on to the main thing for the workshop and the thing that I was most excited about. You see, I think there are a couple of issues with sandpaper storage, especially disc sanding storage. Most people have them on open shelves to store them on the wall, which is perfectly fine, but I don't like mine getting dusty. I want them to be as clean as possible, being that I store them in the workshop. I also want them to be easy access. One issue with the open shelf system is that you need to take the entire shelf out or the entire pack of sandpaper, take one sandpaper out and put the entire pack back. It's just a waste of time. And finally, I would like something that looks good, but also is a bit modular. Up until now, I've had the boxes that the sandpaper came in this cabinet right here. And that makes it really hard to get them out. First of all, you have to look for the right one, and 3M doesn't make that super easy on you. But I also have to open the box, take one out, and then put them back. So that's bad. So to address all the issues, I started by coming up with ideas. The first idea I had was to simply make a shelf like everyone else is and then put a piece of clear acrylic in front of it to prevent the dust from reaching the sandpaper. But that didn't solve all of my issues, so I kept trying to come up with ideas, and I came up with a round shape that kind of swings on a dowel. So I modeled that up in Fusion 360 and came up with an idea that I started 3D printing. One of the really cool features of a 3D printer is that you're able to model the parts yourself. And even though it might sound hard, it has a bit of a learning curve, but once you get over that, you've expanded your creative arena so much, it's incredible. Because even though I'm making something out of wood, I can use the 3D printer as a prototyping machine. I could, for instance, print the piece of furniture I've been thinking of making, see it in real life, although a bit smaller than in reality. And here are all the pieces I've 3D printed. It's a bunch of containers for sandpaper with the grit size printed on each container. There's a hole in each container for the dowel to go down into, and then there's a smaller circle indentation for magnets. My magnets are 8mm in diameter and 3mm thick. There are also 2 pieces that support the entire structure, and they go onto the wall. Lastly, there's also a base plate that serves one purpose, and that is to keep the entire pack of containers in one position. And then there's a pile of mistakes. So the way they go together is that I attach a magnet in each hole. Jesus, there are so many holes in this video. I used super glue to keep them in place, even though it's a tight fit. There's one at the bottom and one at the top of each container. Then I just thread the dowel into the base plate and then put all of the pockets on the dowel in the order I want them. Between every container I put a small 3D printed washer. That will keep the containers from bumping into each other. Some of the pockets are deeper than others. Depending on how much paper you have, you can adjust that. And of course I made a similar one for 125mm paper as well, and for the Imperial people out there, I've designed an alternative for a 1/2-inch dowel as well. And if you want to try to make it out of wood, I've included some SVG files for laser cutting, CNC machining, or just printing and cutting with something else. When all the pockets are on, I put the top pieces and the last wall connector on top, and then I can cut the dowel to length by marking the dowel where to be cut. The small wall pieces also has a screw hole on the top to keep the dowel from spinning. Then my disc storage was ready to attach to the wall. I screw it in place with pre-drilled holes in the holder and voila! So let's try it out. Since all the containers are magnetized, you can just push one to the side like this. It opens up and there's a thumb hole so you can reach and take the paper you want. And yeah, it's quite easy. I have stocked my papers upside down. Doesn't really matter, but I find it easier. I enjoy using the Cubitron paper, so I buy them in packs of 50. So I made some containers that are quite a lot wider than others. So let's address the issues that I had. The first one was dust protection, and I think I've got that covered. The bottom plate is not only there to keep the dust out, it's also there to keep the entire pile of containers in an angle. Because if I were to place them like this, it would be really hard to get a paper out because of the angle they're in. So if I keep them in an angle, one of them swings out and it's easy to get the paper out. The other issue was easy access, and I have to say this is so easy. I can do it one-handed. I can bring the sander with me and put the sandpaper on in one go. And finally, modularity and looking good. And I think I've got the modularity covered, because if I were to get more paper, I can just print a new container, put a new dowel in, and just extend the entire packet of containers. Now there's one thing that kind of bothers me, and that's the filament I got for this project. I bought 3 kilos of this marble PLA and I couldn't get it to stick to the print bed at all. So most of the containers I printed have a slight slope where the magnet goes, and therefore there's a small gap here, which kind of annoys me. I made the prototype out of black PLA, this one, and it looks perfect. There was no gaps at all, but I bought this marble PLA for the video to look good for you, but I couldn't just throw it away, so yeah, I'll have to live with one small gap, I think. I think this is the best sandpaper storage I've seen. What do you think? If you want to get the files, there's a link down below in the description. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.